people were driven to the edge of desperation. There's billions to be made there, to be carved out and to be taken. The capitalist European and North American powers have carved out and taken the timber, the bauxite. They have taken out of these countries. These countries are not underdeveloped. They're overexploited. They're overexploited. They're overexploited.
A very special good evening and welcome to another edition of the Lall Show right here on Kaichor Radio, where we tell it like it is. My name is Shikema, a reporter at Kaichor News, and I will be moderating tonight's show. Now, just a reminder, the Lall Show is live broadcasted 3 times a week. That's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and it is where we discuss all things our leaders do not want us to know. Now, for years, Kaichor News, Guyana's best-selling daily newspaper, has been exposing the mismanagement, corruption, and I dare say, disrespect for Guyana's prime resources. Now, I know that it may be often be overwhelming and difficult to understand what the journalists of Kaichor News write in our news articles. So this is where Mr. Lall, as well as the panel, join to discuss these topics in simple layman's terms so that you, our viewers and listeners, can fully understand what is going on in our country. With me here tonight are 2 esteemed journalists at Kaichor News, and no strange faces to you, Miss Kiana Wilburg and Mr. Kemol King, as well as the man of the hour, Mr. Glenn Lall, the publisher of Kaichor News. Now, before I hand you over to Mr. Lall, just a few housekeeping matters. Let me remind you that you can call us on 226-7453, 226-7453, or WhatsApp us or send us a text message on 622-222 with your questions or comments. And for those on the web, you can visit the Kaichor Radio Facebook page where this program is being live streamed. You're also free to shoot us a comment or whatever questions you have. So now, Mr. Lall, I'll hand the baton over to you.
Struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. No, we ain't giving up no mountain, and we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belong to we, not the one blue sake.
Thank you, Shikema. We are a peaceful people. Struggle in, we struggle. We no look for trouble, just ask around. That's a beautiful song. Very beautiful song. I plan to hear that song many, many, many more moons to come until we get a fair share of our own wealth. Before I begin tonight's program, I want to share a secret with all of you. I hope you keep this secret between me and you don't tell a single soul. I put powder on my face tonight for the 5th or 6th time in my lifetime. And my girl Kiana Wilburg, she placed it on my face and says, boss, you gotta look good on Facebook and YouTube. So I hope that stays a secret between me and you. I just want to say thanks and good night for listening to this show. I hope you have been enjoying it. And all I want to say before I begin tonight's program is we only want the best for Guyana and for all its people. There's a quote I said a few weeks ago: the beauty of life does not only depend on how happy you are, but how happy others can be because of you. That has been my life. If you have been reading the Kaicho News for over the last 27 years, that is what all we wanted. We wanted the best for you, and we wanted the best for Guyana. So, tonight's program, I have some interesting stories to tell you. Please sit back, relax, and enjoy the program. There's a saying that goes, action speaks louder than words. Most of you must have heard that saying. It is like some people who always have sweet and kind words to say to you all the time, in which you think highly of them. And behind your back, yes, behind your back, you see a different individual. Some people in big office dress up and go to work. When you hear them talk, you believe them as saints, cannot thief at all. And the next thing you hear, they are before the magistrates for thieving the ministry's money. Yes, human beings is known for hiding behind sweet words and beautiful clothing. Just look around where you live. They are all over the place, hiding behind a veil in which you can never know the truth about them and the schemes they are planning behind closed doors. We have enough of them in government offices right across this land. Guyana, I choose to tell you this because the same can be said of many of our leaders. They sweet talk you and never deliver. You know what I'm talking about. All those sweet promises they make before elections. And what comes out of it? Nothing. Not one of their promises they fulfill. But that's another story we can talk about another day. You know, over the time, my mic is not working. My mic was working?
Yes,
All
all
right.
the time.
You know, over time, in our lives, we get to learn people's behavior. And we just have to be careful how we bundle, how you tie bundle, how you assemble bundle with them. But when we have media houses who behaves like those people, it becomes worrying. When media houses can dance and hide truths from its readers, it is sad, and I want to bring this story to your attention, Guyana. It has to do with the Kanji oil block and what ExxonMobil says about it yesterday. First, I need to tell you the Kaicho News headline on that story. And I'll read it for you. ExxonMobil plans 3-well campaign on suspiciously awarded Kanji oil block. That was our headline. I want to read the headline from the Guyana Times. That says, ExxonMobil spuds new exploration well offshore Guyana. Hear the difference? Kaicho News talk about 3-well campaign on suspiciously awarded Kanji oil block. The Guyana Times says ExxonMobil spuds new exploration well offshore Guyana. I share the two headlines just to let you know they're ashamed to mention the name Kanji, where Exxon plans to drill the 3 wells. What is even worse, the entire story they carried did not even mention the name Kanji, where the wells are being drilled. Why? What are they hiding? Why the silence on the Kanji oil block? Why leave out the most important aspect of the story by not naming where these wells are to be drilled? I remember they had a popular talk show host named Clem David. When he tried to bamboozle people with his deliberate and twisted stories, people used to call him out on them. I remember one caller said to him, Clem, your hair slip showing. I can say that was a deliberate left out by the newspaper, because they don't want y'all to remember what the PPP did with the Kanji oil block. The first thing the owners did, let me remind you, they sold 50% to Exxon. How much billions Exxon paid for it? And who is the real beneficiaries of that cash? Guyana is yet to find out. Now that Exxon begins to drill, and they want to put a spin on the story, like if Exxon drilling more wells in the Tobago block. But not coming straight with y'all. Where they're drilling, them so shame to use the word Kanji they're drilling. That same Kanji oil block that was hijacked from us. They think by keeping that from the public eyes, no one will remember how and when that same Kanji block disappeared from us. That worth, if you remember, billions of US dollars. Exxon says the estimate in the first well is 500 million barrels of oil equivalent. And that the next two wells on the same Kanji block, they estimated to have a whooping 1 billion barrels. Listen, Guyana. Listen carefully. They went a little further to say, they explained to drill, they wanted to drill 12 more wells in that same Kanji block, in which they estimate to find another 10 billion barrels. So if you total them, you get almost 13 billion barrels of oil equivalent. That's just in the Kanji oil block alone. Wow. That must be holding almost 100 billion. Because I, Glenn Lall, having been following the oil industry for the last 5 years, don't believe anything these oil companies says, especially ExxonMobil. And all of you should also not believe a single word these oil companies say. Why? Because they have been known for scampishness and wholesale deceitfulness right across the oil industry. But I want you to focus on the money. Keep your head on with the money, what they're talking about. They're just telling us 13 billion. But I am in my own estimation, that place have more than 100 billion barrel in Kanji oil block alone. I hope you guys are listening to me. Mm-hmm. The Kanji block, that same Kanji block, was part of what Exxon had to give up from the Tobago block which they have. Every 4 years, all of them must return to Guyana 20% of something called relinquishment. I will ask one of my colleagues to explain relinquishment so you can understand what it means. And then I'll take back the mic.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mr. Lall, for the opportunity to break down what is one of the controversial provisions in the oil and gas production sharing agreements that we have out there. It's complex, but it's quite easy to understand. Now, relinquishment occurs when the oil company is given an offshore concession, or it could be an onshore concession, but in Guyana's case, offshore. And after the first renewal phase, which is a period of 4 years, the company has to apply for another renewal. But in order to get that renewal, it has to give up at least, in some cases, 15 or 20% or 25% of the block. That's dependent on the negotiations that occur between the oil company and the minister of the day. Now, the relinquishment is very important because it helps to reduce the monopoly or the control that that company is going to have on the entire basin. You don't want a company holding on to a large acreage out there and preventing others from getting an opportunity to be able to explore as well. So that's basically what it's about.
Thank you, Kiana. Very well done. So the Kanji Block came from Exxon, from the Stabroek Block Exxon had first applied for and got. They had to give up that Kanji Block. I was told, listen to me carefully, I was told from a good source that Exxon offered the PPP government at the time to buy it back, in which Guyana could have raked in billions for us. Yes, for us, me and you, Guyana, the poor people of this country, Guyana. Money that could have built 25 bridges and 25 more airports and fixed all our roads, our dilapidated roads in this country, and sea defenses. Had our leaders sold it back to Exxon and collected that cash. Instead, what them boys did, they give it away to people themselves. Them never see or them never know. Isn't that a Nancy story, Guyana? Come on. Come on, Guyana. You gotta smile or you gotta laugh when you hear excuses like this. Ask David Granger. Ask Harmon. Ask Trotman. Ask Donald Ramotar. Ask Jack Deo. And Robert Passad. Who is the people that received the cash for the Kanji and the Kaichor oil blocks? You know, we did a series of articles in the Kaichor News in which we exposed in great details, the suspicious circumstances that led to the giveaway of the oil blocks to people who were broke and had no experience in the oil sector by the PPP regime. A matter of fact, Kanji oil block was given to two men, Yuli Nelson and Nicholas Chomasan. Nicholas is a geologist, and guess where he's working right now? Guyana. In the energy department. That's where this man is working right now. The other one, Nelson, was working at the Marriott Hotel and many other places. Both men who is well known in the political circle of this land. And your leaders saying they don't know who they give it to. When you contact them, this is what they told the Kaicho News. One said, I cannot remember. It was a long time. And one said, he driving and can't hear good. They both promised to call back. But Guyana is still waiting to hear from them. So many stories we would have carried on these oil blocks in which their names have been mentioned. Not a word you hear from them. And all we're hearing is if you talk, you're going to get sued. Matter of fact, ex-President Donald Ramatar sued me and the Kaicho News when we ask basic questions as to who and why he signed away the oil blocks. That matter is for decision in a few months' time. None of our leaders, both in the PPP and the PNC, plus the AFC, is coming out to say anything on the oil blocks giveaway since 2015 to 2020. It was only because of the banging of the Kaicho News since then that we finally heard at a press conference, and Jagdev says he ain't seen no laws broken and he does not believe there was any corruption. Imagine, Guyana, billions of US dollars of our oil blocks land in people's hand, receiving tons and tons of US dollars for themselves, and all we are hearing is no no corruption and no laws broken. You see what I mean, Guyana? I hope you're following me carefully. You know, lots of people calling on me to lead a protest in this country. Let me tell you what I say to them all. I said to them, a protest requires people, and people must know when they go out in the streets why they are protesting. I said, if a man or a woman does not understand why they're going out on the road to protest, they will not come out. You need to understand, we need to know, you need to know, unless we educate them as to what they're losing, you will not get people out into the streets. If a man does not know what he's losing, if a man does not know what he's worth, you have to tell them. Let me share this with you. I asked two accountants what they understand about this new oil fine and what is there for them. Only yesterday I spoke to them. One said, it didn't look good for we. We ain't gonna get anything. And she was smiling. The other one says, well, sir, we leaders not saying much. And she too had a face like, whatever, whatever. My next question to both of them was, do you live in your own house? And she said, no, sir, I am renting. I told her, you better wake up and stop waiting on your leaders to help you. Get to understand what you have out there and how rich you are now, today as we speak, so you can get up and fight for it. I asked her if she found out that her father has a few prime properties in New Amsterdam, Borbies, if she would allow strangers to come and grab it up. She raised her head and loudly says, no, 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 no. She will fight for it. Fight for it to have a better life. I smiled and told her, that's my point. You are already rich. You have to fight. You have to fight for your properties. You have to fight for your wealth. And I told her, those oil blocks is not your father's properties. It is yours. It is ours. It is our transported property. All of us, it belongs to Guyana. I told them both, if we just can get a reasonable share of it, we can all own more than houses, cars, with big, hefty, fat bank accounts. You can even own houses in New York, only if you get a fair deal. A fair deal from the contract our leaders signed. A fair deal like what other nations have. I told them Kaicho News went through 130 contracts from across this world, and none, hearing me Guyana, none resembles ours. It is the worst oil contract we found in the world. Ours is so criminal that some people say, Glenn, when these people done with Guyana, we all will be slaving to repay them same oil companies with the debt they'll be leaving us in. Guyana, this is exactly where we are with our resources, especially our oil. We are filthy rich, so rich that we all should be living like kings and queens with what we have out there under the Atlantic Ocean waters and in our interior lands. All of us should have been driving a Mercedes-Benz. And it's not Glenn Lall saying this. 3 years ago, I met a Scottish guy at the Princess Hotel. He was having a drink there, and I saw him sitting alone. I invited him. I first sent him a beer, and I gave him, and I invited him on my table. And the man could not pronounce. He could not pronounce Guyana or Guyanese. But he said this to me: all of us should have had our own mansions and fancy cars, eating and living large, drinking the best red wine and whiskeys the world produce, like how all the people live in some of the oil producing countries. And this is the same man telling me that because he's working with one of the oil companies and know how rich we are. We should not be stretching out our hands begging and waiting for 25,000 handout Guyana. We should not have to walk the streets hiding our phones in our underwear. We should not have 12,000 of our brothers and sisters living on public assistance. No, we should not. Listening to one of my radio programs yesterday with Leonard Gildari, one lady called in begging our government to increase old age pension. Begging for 20,000 increase for old age pension. You hear that, Guyana? And say if the government can, then they should give them 10,000 for help them buy groceries. When I hear that, and knowing our worth, our value, the resources we have, it makes your heart sickening. I feel like scream and tell Guyana, guys, you gotta wake up. wake up from that coma it seems you guys in by not saying a single word as to what is happening and the life that you're living. Let me say this, Guyana. You cannot find a job, no way. If you do, people complain you cannot pay rent. That cannot do for me. That cannot mind my family. They cannot pay me light bill, me water bill, me phone bill. And guess what, Guyana? All the Americans, the Canadians, the British, the Australians, the French oil companies out there, check and see how their citizens are living. In them country, if you lose your work, the government pays you until you find another job. Then pays your rent. You get free groceries. The government also help the people to keep a shelter over your heads. It is called government assistance. They give the people free medical, free dental, free everything, free food. And guess what? If they have kids, free college and free transportation. With whose money, Guyana? Whose money you think is doing all of that for their people? Ours. Yes, guys. Ours. Me and you. Our resources. Our gold, our diamond, our bauxite, our timber. Our leaders are giving away only to fill their pockets. And we cannot find 10,000 Guyana dollars for give old people groceries in an house. You know, before we take your calls or read your comments, let me repeat something we said yesterday on the front page to 7 of our leaders in this country. We told them, oil is our future. It is not a 7-day wonder. And Kaicho News is also not a 7-day wonder. We said to them, this oil is Guyana's future. It is many people's hope for generations to come. It is more than gold, bauxite, timber, and fisheries combined. We said, silence and sitting on one hands are not options for these 7 men. Not for former President David Granger, Donald Ramotar, or Bharat Jagdev. Not for former ministers Robert Prasad, Raphael Trotman. Not for President Ali, and certainly not for our opposition leader Joseph Harman. Silence is not an option for us either. Many powerful companies, powerful people, and powerful places around the world pin a significant part of their future prospects on our oil, our resources. These people know more about our oil than we do. Why? 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 We must know much more. And we should be told much more from these 7 sons of Guyana. We who are poor have more of our future dependent on this oil resources and the other resources. Silence is not an option for us. Playing hide and seek is not an option. Playing at ignorance is not an option. Not for them, and certainly not for us, me and you, Guyana. We point to our neighbor Trinidad, in which an expert told us Trinidad lost $17 billion from 2010 to 2017, in 7 years that is, due to a single loophole in their oil system. We do not want to, nor should we lose that kind of money because of our leaders' negligence or failure to have the political will. This silence of these political figures conforms negligence, incompetence, and things that do not speak to either prudence or intelligence. We want to hear about this oil. We call on the sitting president, former presidents, and former ministers to tell the nation everything. Tell all of us, all the people, the truths about our oil. And remember, Guyana, we are not going away or fading away. We will be around for a long, long time to come. Now, Guyana, we are ready for your phone calls or your questions. Thank you.
Alrighty then. Thank you so much, Mr. Lall, for that fruitful presentation. At this point, we will be taking a very short commercial break. But before we go on that break, let me remind you that you can send your text messages, your comments, your questions to 6222222, or you can call us on 226-7453, 226-7453. And if you just joined us, remember that you are tuned in to the Glenn Lall Show right here on Kiteshore Radio, 99.1, 99.5.
The third world is not poor. You don't go to poor countries to make money. There are very few poor countries in this world. Only the people are poor. When people didn't have enough to eat, when people were driven to the edge of desperation, there's billions to be made there, to be carved out and to be taken. The capitalist European and North American powers have carved out and taken the timber, the bauxite. They have taken out of these countries. These countries are not underdeveloped. They're overexploited. They're overexploited. They're overexploited. The third world is not poor. You don't go to poor countries to make money. There are very few poor countries in this world. Only the people are poor. When people didn't have enough to eat, when people were driven to the edge of desperation, there's billions to be made there, to be carved out and to be taken. The capitalist European and North American powers have carved out and taken the timber, the bauxite. They have taken out of these countries. These countries are not underdeveloped. They're overexploited. They're overexploited. They're overexploited.
Welcome back and thanks for staying tuned. If you just joined us, you are tuned in to the Glenn Lall Show on Kiteshore Radio, where we tell it as it is. I will now hand you over to Mr. Kemol King, and you will now get some input from the panel.
Okay, thank you, Shikema. So, last night, when we were on Petroleum 101, we discussed something that Mr. Lall just closed on, and that's the silence of our politicians. And there are so many examples that come to mind when I think of the silence of our politicians. Just over the past few days, we have had to write several stories calling out these politicians. People like the Vice President, Dr. Bharat Jagdeo, people like the Minister of Natural Resources, Mr. Vikram Bharat, for making promises to the populace, for making promises to the media that they're going to release certain information. And when push comes to shove, 2-3 months later, they're not putting out any of this information. So the obvious question for me is, why do you as a public official promise that you're going to put out this information when you won't do so? The government has promised to put out the review that it had the Canadian consultant Alison Redford do on the Payara project. the government has also promised that it's going to publish all of the permits that were handed to oil companies, even the ones that were kept secret under the previous administration. I understand that the PPP government would find it prudent for them to come in and say, I am going to make all this information public because that gives you political points over your opponent. But what good is you saying that if you're not going to keep your promises? And we as media, we have a duty to scrutinize all of this information so that we can present it to the people in a way that helps them understand their wealth. And how are we supposed to do that if the government is keeping so much secret? I don't understand.
Kiana, would you input
Well,
here?
yes, Kemol, you made a very interesting point there, and I actually wrote it down to talk a little bit about it. Mr. Lall, in his presentation, spoke about Trinidad and Tobago, how it lost millions of dollars within, I believe, 17 million US in a 7-year span. Now, I think we need to put some perspective on that. This is a country that has, or had at the time, and it still has, way more modern legislation to protect the oil sector when compared to Guyana. They have way more technical people than we do at this point in time. They have a better procurement system in place. Many aspects or components of their oil and gas governance framework is far more advanced, and still they lost 17 million US. Billion US, sorry. Guyana is in a worse situation, and we stand to lose way more. If you really take a look at that picture, how much Trinidad and Tobago lost, and it was far more prepared than Guyana is to date. What do you expect is going to happen with the resources that we have? And then you combine that with the secrecy, the level of secrecy, and the lack of disclosure on key information, some fundamental pieces of information. For example, one of the things that we don't get on a daily basis is what's the production rate that's going on right now. We have to depend on ExxonMobil to tell us whenever they feel like about the production offshore Guyana. That's a fundamental thing that should be published almost on a daily basis or on a weekly basis from the government. And when you consider these matters, it really gives you a frightening picture of where we are going, where we're heading. I really don't think that we understand. You know, in the past, I've heard the members of the now opposition say, "Oh, we will learn from the mistakes made by other countries. We will learn." It's like it's just become so mechanical now. So, and when you look at their actions, you can clearly see that they have done nothing. They've been sleeping at the wheel. They continue to sleep at the wheel. And we have a government that seems to want to join that bandwagon as well.
Thank you, guys. Kiana, I just want to add to what you guys said. Today, I was chatting with a Trini who's in Guyana, and he spent 33 years in the oil industry. Chatting with this man, he only makes me more sick with what's taking place with our resources in this land. This man said the very first thing Guyana should have done, which I plan to embark on anyway, other than this radio. The man said the first thing Guyana should have done is educate the people of this nation as to oil. He said we should begin to educate people from nursery. He said a book just came out. It's not in the printed form, and he planned to lend me a copy to show how every single body growing up now needs to understand what this oil about and the tricks in it and what you can get from it. He said Trinidad made thousands of mistakes. A matter of fact, he said he used back the same 1,000 and said you can thief oil in 1,000 ways. So he told me that just for me to understand that, guys, if you don't educate the people, if you don't put systems in place, if we don't have people to monitor what's taking place, and they must know what they're monitoring, we are in for a big ride. Our future children and children's future is at stake here. We chatted so much that it was overwhelming on me, trying to capture everything he said. But it's a lot we have to do. And when he talked about educating children in school, I never even thought about that. He said every children in Trinidad knows about oil industry. And Guyana should first begin with that.
Yeah, one of the things that stayed with me when we were talking to him, Mr. Lall, was that he would repeatedly say, there are a million ways that you could get conned by these oil companies.
That's right.
And Trinidad does so much monitoring and they have built their capacity so much. And like Kiana said, we're in a worse place and it leaves us even more susceptible to get conned. He talked about how there are so many ways that oil companies can steal your oil right out from under your nose. They can report untruths to you about the amount of oil being produced.
That's right.
While they're picking out a little every day. And it just puts me to a place where I want to know all of the ways that Trinidad has suffered, just so that I can make sure that we don't suffer like that too.
But if I can just add to that, Kemol, there are 2 points that I just want to raise. And that's one, we're talking about the protection of our wealth and learning from the mistakes made by Trinidad and Tobago. I remember about 2 or 3 years ago when Kaiser News was now delving into the provisions of the ExxonMobil lopsided deal for the Stabroek Block. We had pointed out, the first thing that we started to look at was the arrangements Trinidad and Tobago had in place to ensure the effective measurement, the transparent and accountable measurement of their oil. But when we looked at their provisions and we went through our contract, surprisingly, there was not a single word on how Guyana should go about protecting its interests in the measurement of the oil. Not a single provision is in place. So if we find that one of the equipment that's supposed to be in place to monitor the measurements it's been tampered with, we have nothing, absolutely nothing to go on to institute a fine, to do anything. That is how exposed Guyana is. And even after Kaiser News would have exposed something like that, called for the contract to be renegotiated, called for some level of protection, either regulations or guidelines to be put in place, absolutely nothing was done.
Kiana, I asked him a question. I asked the Trini a question today, and Kemol said something that really irked me. I asked the man how many people Trinidad employed to monitor their oil industry. The man said to me Trinidad had about 20,000 people on the payroll monitoring their oil and gas. He said now the natural gas in Trinidad has over 1,800 people working in the oil and gas alone, in the natural gas alone. What Guyana has? Guyana has an office with maybe less than 18 people. Not 1,800, 18 people. And what made me irk and smile is that one of the people who's working in that energy department, Guyana, is the man who get the Kanji oil block. You didn't hear what I said. One of the man, a geologist, Nicholas Changasan, is working in our energy department. So whose interest this man will be looking out for? Think about it. Wow. Think about that, Guyana. Trinidad has 1,800 people. We have maybe less than 18. And forget about 18. We have one man who the oil block was given to, working in the energy department. So let me ask you, whose interest is man working for? You or me? Ah, what a Guyana we live in. What a Guyana we
You know,
live in.
Mr. Lall, two things just jump out at me there. And what you're talking about points to how this sector, the management, the framework in place to ensure proper governance for this sector is in such a disarray. I don't know where something like that can happen, especially in a country that is interested in ensuring transparency and accountability are the overarching principles for the sector. There is no way that he should have been anywhere near the governance framework for the oil and gas sector. But yet he's there, and even after it has been announced, absolutely nothing is being done.
Kiana, disarray is not a word to describe these things that's happening in this country. You know? Disarray puts it mild. You have a man, you install a man, or the government install a man there who an oil block lands in his company. What does that tell you? That tells a story. It tells a story that these guys, they are all working with all our oil blocks for themselves. Because if he's working in the energy department, and then you have Exxon who buy in part of their oil blocks, then who's monitoring what? And who's giving us what? What do you have to get there? Man, do the maths and read through the lines, and you will see what's happening. There's so much we can talk about this oil resources that sometimes it's overwhelming. Only when we speak, that's why we want your questions. Only when we talk, then these things pops up in our head to let you know. It seems as if they're running this country, or this country belongs to them alone. And guess what? Our leaders installed them there. A matter of fact, Robert Prasad, who say he know nothing, he installed making other deals. Making other deals. What is happening in this land, Guyana? What is going on? These are the type of questions you got to ask yourself. This is why you cannot sleep. Because you will wake up drunk and you don't know what you drink.
We have a comment, not a question. This person says, each time I listen to this program, my blood boils. The situation is getting out of hand, and I am calling for a revolution. How can we have rogue officials of government getting away with high-class crime? I call on right-thinking Guyanese to let us all contribute to the funding of this independent investigation of the giving away of our patrimony. I'm willing to put my first dollar. This is an effort that requires all Guyanese on board. Let's get rid of these rogue politicians. I call on Robert Prasad to step down and Donald Ramatar to explain why he sinned against this nation.
Yeah, I love that comment. let me add to that comment. And this is why you need these kind of comments and questions. Mr. Jagdeo called, he said he had no problem with an international investigation. Harman says the same thing. Trotman says the same thing. Granger says the same thing. Where now you're not hearing a word from any one of them. When and where is this international investigation will happen? We're still waiting on that. And we have to demand that. Because skullduggery is going on in this country with our leaders, and we need to bind ourselves together and stand up and fight for our fair share of this country.
Mr. Lall, as you said that, it reminds me there's so many things that you can talk about on this
Yes,
program.
I know.
Oh,
How
goodness.
brilliant.
But you spoke about the importance of getting up and fighting for a fair deal. And I just want to speak a little bit about the importance of programs like these. I know that it's only unique to the Kaichur News team, this initiative that we've embarked on to educate our Guyanese brothers and sisters about what's going on in the oil and gas sector. But I really don't think people understand, in the absence of being educated about what is going on with your wealth, your politicians are benefiting from your miseducation.
Perfect. Well said.
It is so much easier for them to get away with corruption because you don't know anything.
That's right.
And you're not asking questions.
And they're not saying anything.
And they're not going to say anything. So, I would encourage our listeners, wherever you are, continue to participate. Don't be shy. Send your questions and your comments. We are here to help you understand this very complex sector in a most simple manner. So, Alan, over to you, Mr. Lall.
Okay, there's another question. One person wants to know, what is the first step towards making this right, and what are the next steps for the average citizen to aid in such a situation?
To make this right, to correct this wrong, I can't even find words to describe this contract. But to make it right, our leaders have to call in the players and say, bro, come in, sit down, and let's talk. Our neighbor, Trinidad, Keith Rowley says he called in BP and put his team, and BP put together a team, and they put together a team, and they were able to renegotiate the contract in favor of the Trinidad people, because he told the oil companies squarely and fairly that any contract that benefits one side is not a contract. And we don't even have a contract that benefits only one side. We have a contract that benefits only one side, and that is the oil companies them side. So when you listen that and you see what's taking place here, how our leaders are silent, it makes me think, it makes me want to believe, and I am of the belief that some of our players are directly involved in these oil companies. They are directly involved, meaning that they are part and parcel of it. So they will not stand up and speak up for Guyana, because they would be looking out for their pockets. And we cannot sit back idle and allow this to happen. We need to call them out every single minute of the day and said, no, we can't continue living like this. We deserve a better life. Every one of you deserve a better life. As a matter of fact, all the Guyanese right across this world should be coming back here, and they will have a better life if we only get to change those criminal contracts that our leaders sign. and staying silent.
Mr. Lall, this thing about holding politicians accountable, I had been looking at how we deal with ministers and our members of parliament, and even before oil, we have this culture where we allow MPs, for example, to sit back in parliament a few times a year, collect their fat salaries, and we don't know what they're doing for this country, and if they're even knowledgeable about what's going on in this sector. And COVID has made it so much more difficult. We've had how many? About 20 or so ministers appointed. And many of them, you have not heard a single thing about what they've been doing for this country, let alone what they know about the oil sector since this government took office. I wonder what these ministers are doing.
Let me try to answer that question. I have spent a long time, 27 years in the newspaper, and I have been seeing reports, and I have been watching, and I have been listening to almost all the leaders, what comes out of their mouth, and I get to understand many of them what's in their brain. And I will answer that question that all the political players, well, not all, I should say, many of almost all of them, what they fight for power, just to go in there and look out. All they're looking out, what is for their pockets and that of their friends and their family. You know, tomorrow we are carrying a story in which one of the reporters said, oh my, just announced a gold fine, a huge gold fine. And guess what, Guyana? We are still in the dark. We are still in the dark because OMI can announce the gold fine, but none of our leaders can say, well, what Guyana is going to get from OMI. Maybe Guyana will get another spill or a bigger spill to kill us this time. Now, these are the kind of things, Kemol. These are the kind of things that's happening in our country.
Right.
Our leaders just going in there and just fining people, especially foreigners and their friends, and put them in where our resources are, only so that they can rip us off and the leaders' pockets are filled. That's what is happening. And that is what has been happening for the last 30 years since I began following politics in this country. That's all they do. They do nothing else. What? You the local man, try to get a piece of land. Look, a piece of land. You know, we talked about the worth of Kanji and Kaichor and Orandu oil blocks.
Yes.
How much it worth, right? Billions. Guess what, Kemol, Kiana, and Shikema? If you go and apply for a piece of mining land, just a block, just one block, which is 1,200 acres, guess what? You got that goes on auction, and you have to bid for that, and you have to pay millions of dollars to get a piece, just a single block of 1,200 acres. Here you have foreigners coming in. Foreigners, oh my, come and see, own half of Guyana already, in which they said they find this massive gold block yesterday. All the foreigners, AAGM come here and did it. The Australian companies here, the bauxite company here. A matter of fact, if you try to go into the bauxite neighborhood, you can't go there. Those people lock it off. They have like an army there that you can't go around their neighborhood. Our local guys can't pass through there. Yes, they got guns with guards blocking you from passing through your own land that belong to you, land that belong to us, land that they got free from our leaders, stopping us from passing through this. And this is factual. I know this. You understand?
Yeah.
But guess what? that me and you ain't got rights on our own land. You hear this, Guyana? You gotta go and buy the land. You want a house lot? You better find $1 million or $2 million to pay them for a house lot, a 10 feet by 10 feet house lot. But these foreigners can come in and pick up your lands by thousands of acres. A matter of fact, I am told just 2 days ago that a foreign company in Keraku, or whatever, I don't remember the name, already got a deal of 4,000 acres. And the man was shocked. The man was saying, Glenn, you hear it? I said, no. That's another company there.
Mhm.
Who gave them? I don't know. I'm still checking on that. Our oil blocks that worth billions didn't go on auction for people to bid. They just gave it away. They just gave it away. We are like monkeys. We are like fools. We are animals. We are dogs. That's how all the leaders of this land is treating us. You and me, Guyana.
It's just today, Mr. Lall, how we were talking about how our local small miners are paying a 7% tax
Perfect.
in total. And ExxonMobil, a mega corporation with billions of dollars and shareholders that come from the wealthy 1%, are just paying a 2% royalty and no taxes.
No, let me correct that, Kemol. ExxonMobil is not paying 2%. 2%. ExxonMobil is paying less than 2%. They added transportation costs to that 2%. Meaning you have to pay for the oil from the rig to wherever it's going to be sold. You may very well get less than 0.5% when they hand you a bill for transportation alone. ExxonMobil is exempted from paying any taxes whatsoever in this land. And guess what? Me and you, the poor rice farmer or the cane cutter or the ministry workers, the police, the nurses, and all of us in the media houses have to pay a full share of taxes. If not, they want to send the tax man on you to lock you up or to send you before the courts. This is what is happening, Guyana. This is what is happening between foreigners and us, between our wealth and us. That's what our leaders are doing. And guess what? They're silent. They are silent. They're behaving like if they get Alzheimer's disease.
All right, we're winding down to the last few seconds of the Glenn Lall Show on Kaicho Radio. But before we close, I have one last question, Mr. Lall. Someone would like to know if you think what's happening is deliberate or it's merely incompetence.
Incompetent? No, I wouldn't say incompetent. This, what is happening to us in this country, is a deliberate act. I cannot see, I cannot fathom for a moment that Raphael Trotman, an attorney at law, who has a degree, you name the degree for me, please, I can't answer that.
He is a trained negotiator from Harvard University.
You hear that, Guyana? I don't think Guyana hear you. Raphael Trotman has a degree in trained contract negotiator.
At one of the best universities on the planet.
On the planet. You can't tell me, Mr. Jadeo, a smart man, and all the rest of them who are lawyers and professionals and UG graduates, what is happening here, they don't know. They know what is going on, and it's a deliberate thing. And I can only say, something is going their way. Something is going their way. You just got to look out when it's going and how it's going, Guyana.
And with that, that has brought us to the end of the Glen Lall Show. I'd like to thank Mr. Lall for his very wonderful presentation. And I'd also like to thank Mr. Kemol King and Miss Kiana Wilburg for their fruitful input. So you guys can join us on Friday, same time, same place, for another edition of the Glen Lall Show. Thank you so much for joining us, and do have a wonderful evening.
Good night.
Guyana, this is a hijack. Highway robbery. Two-wheel blocks.